I sold my truck the day the land deed came through. Not because I had to. I had enough saved, but it felt symbolic somehow, letting go of the old life to start a new one. Lynn said that was dramatic, but she smiled when I handed her the keys to the front gate and said, "It's all yours." She'd talked about country life for years. Chickens, a little garden, waking up with the sunrise instead of a car alarm. Back when we were both still working, it had been nothing more than daydream talk, something to fantasize about while we fought traffic or stood in line at the bank. But I guess when I hit 58 and turned in my retirement paperwork, the dream stopped being a fantasy and became a plan. I didn't mind. After 32 years working the warehouse, my knees were giving up faster than I liked to admit. And truth be told, I was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind that settles in your bones and doesn't go away. The kind that makes quiet mornings and slow coffee sound better than any vacation. Lynn was 5 years younger, still full of fire and ambition, but she'd been talking more and more about change, about resetting. I thought she meant for both of us. So when she found the listing, 4.2 acres just outside of Ruidoso, with a small fixer-upper and an old barn that leaned like it was thinking about falling, I said yes. She cried when I told her we'd put in an offer. Not big, dramatic tears. Just that soft kind, like relief. "You really think we can do this?" she asked, her voice catching a little. "Of course," I said. "It's your dream, Lynn. Why wouldn't we?" Looking back, I think that was the moment I gave away the house before I ever owned it. We moved in late spring. The weather was perfect. Warm days, cool nights, that dry high desert air that always smells like sage and sun. I kept telling people I felt 10 years younger out here, and maybe I did, for a little while. We started with the basics, clearing out the brush, fixing the plumbing. The roof needed patching, so I hired a guy from town named Russell, who worked cheap and didn't ask a lot of questions. Lynn handled the paperwork, the permits, the designs, said she wanted to oversee the renovations herself. "You did the heavy lifting your whole life," she told me. "Let me carry this one." I didn't argue. That was always our rhythm. I worked. She planned. I built. She managed. I thought that meant partnership. The first month flew by in sawdust and sunsets. We drank wine on the porch at night. Made lists of what we'd plant once the frost was gone. She kept saying things like, "Can you believe this is ours?" And I'd smile, because even if it didn't feel real yet, it felt right. Then the little things started. First, a receipt in the trash. Hardware supplies I didn't recognize from a store 2 towns over. Nothing big, but odd. I asked if she went out that far. She said, "Oh, must have been a delivery fee," and moved on. Then it was a phone call she took outside. I asked who it was. "Just the contractor," she said. "He likes to explain things over the phone." Later, I went to write a check for some gravel we needed. Our joint account had a few hundred less than it should have. She said it was for paint samples. I didn't ask for proof. I never did. Still, it didn't feel like anything serious. Just hiccups. Adjustments. That's what I told myself. Then, last Tuesday, I went up to the attic to look for a socket set I'd packed away when we moved. It was hot, cramped, dusty, the kind of space you forget exists until you need something from it. I found the toolbox, but right next to it, wedged between an old chair and a roll of insulation, was a thick folder. Blueprints. I opened it, confused at first. It was a full renovation plan, detailed, professional, beautiful even, and on the bottom corner of every page, in small block print, was a name I hadn't heard in almost 2 decades. David Monroe. The name hit me like a rock through glass. Her ex. Her. It was never serious. Ex. The one she told me moved away and disappeared. And here he was, on paper, designing our home. I didn't know what it meant yet, but I knew it wasn't nothing. I closed the folder, placed it back exactly where I found it, and walked downstairs like nothing happened. But something had, and it wasn't going away. Ring a child. "Come on, Frank, don't get weird. You know I've had this vision in my head forever. David just helped put it on paper a long time ago." She kissed my forehead then, just lightly, then left, just like that. But my gut didn't buy it. That afternoon, I drove into town alone. Lynn said she'd be gone all day, so I figured I'd swing by the building supply place, double-check our orders. I walked in and asked the kid at the desk for the last few invoices under our name. He blinked, hesitated. "You want all of them?" he asked. "Yeah, every last one." He printed them off, handed me the stack. I thanked him and sat in the truck outside, reading through them line by line. 3 pages in, I found it. Delivery address, 33 Jackson Hill Road. That wasn't our address. That was a lot on the far end of town, down a gravel road past the old lumber mill. I knew it because I looked at it once before we bought this place. It was too steep, too remote. Not right for us. But someone was sending materials there, under our name, paid from our account. And worse, the design notes matched the plans I saw in the attic. What the hell was she doing? I drove out there, didn't call, didn't text, I just went. And what I saw made my hands grip the wheels so tight my knuckles turned white. It was a foundation, freshly poured, framing started, and there, nailed to a wooden post, was a laminated blueprint, nearly identical to ours. Right at the bottom corner? Designed by David Monroe. I didn't get out, didn't take pictures, didn't scream or lose my mind. I just sat there, truck running, engine humming beneath me like a heartbeat that didn't know what to do with itself. I wasn't sure what it meant yet, but I knew I was no longer building our future. I was funding theirs. That night I didn't bring it up. Lynn came home after dark, carrying takeout from the diner in town, acting like everything was fine. She kissed me like always, soft, light, forgettable. We sat at the kitchen island, eating meatloaf out of plastic containers, and she told me about the tile she picked and how the guy at the solar place was a total idiot. I nodded, listened, smiled when it was expected. I didn't say a damn thing. She went to bed early, claiming a headache. I watched her walk upstairs, barefoot and humming. She was always good at humming. Used to be one of my favorite sounds in the world. Not anymore. Once I heard the bedroom door click shut, I went to the office. I keep all the bills and project documents in a metal file cabinet by the desk. Lynn handled most of the communication with contractors, but I made copies of every check I wrote, every withdrawal from the bank. I went through them like a man possessed. There it was, $5,400 withdrawn 2 weeks ago. Memo line. Consulting fee. No invoice. No attached paperwork. Just a name scribbled in her handwriting. DM. I sat back in the chair, hands shaking, heart thudding in my chest like a freight train. She paid him. Not years ago. Not before us. 2 weeks ago. She didn't just use his old plans. She brought him back into her life, our life, and paid him out of the account I filled. What else had she paid for? I looked around the office. It was quiet, too clean, too carefully staged. The only real mess was in my gut. I opened her laptop. The password was our anniversary. Of course it was. I scrolled through emails, feeling like I was betraying someone, but realizing, with every click, she'd already betrayed me. It didn't take long. There were messages going back 9 months. Not daily, not enough to draw suspicion, but regular, smooth, comfortable. She used a separate folder, buried inside a decoy one called Farm Ideas, and there it all was. Love the new porch design. Feels like home already. Don't worry, he still thinks it's all for us. Once the second place is finished, we can figure out how to transition without blowing everything up. I stopped reading. My hand hovered over the mouse, frozen. The second place. They were building a second house. Ours was the decoy, the warm-up. Mine was the funding. His was the future. I clicked open one of the attached files. A floor plan. The same one I saw at that hidden build site, only this version had annotations. Master bedroom. South-facing window for Lynn's sunrises. Guest room. Just in case Frank visits before we're ready to sell. I almost laughed. Not the real kind. The bitter kind. Dry and sharp in the back of my throat. A guest room. That's what I'd become in my own wife's dream. I closed the laptop, careful not to leave anything open. Sat in silence for 20 minutes, maybe longer. My whole body felt cold. I didn't want to believe it, but belief had nothing to do with it anymore. The numbers, the emails, the prints, they were all telling the same story, and I wasn't the one starring in it. The next morning, I got up at 5 o'clock, like always, made coffee, fed the dogs, sat on the porch and watched the sun rise over land I no longer recognized. Lynn came down around 7:30, hair up, wearing those old boots she claimed she hated when we first moved in, the ones she said made her look too country. Now she wore them like a badge. Morning, she said. You sleep okay? Like a rock. I lied. She poured herself coffee, humming again. Same song. Always the same damn song. I might go into town again later, she added, leaning against the counter. Need to talk to Russell about the siding. I nodded. You going alone? She blinked. Of course. Why? I shrugged. Just wondering. She gave a short laugh. Frank, are you getting jealous of the contractor now? I smiled. Real slow. Not at all. Because it wasn't Russell I was thinking about. It was the man designing her future, with my money on my land. David Monroe. And I was done pretending I didn't see it. The hardest part of betrayal isn't the act itself, it's the silence after. The way everything still looks normal. Coffee in the same mug, dogs waiting at the door, her shampoo in the shower, while your entire foundation crumbles beneath you. That was me, sitting on the porch with a half-empty mug, staring across a field. I cleared myself, wondering how long I'd been the punchline in someone else's plan. But I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. You only get one shot at a clean break when someone's been hiding something this big. And I wasn't about to waste it on a shouting match at breakfast. So I made a list, not on paper, in my head. Just a quiet, steady rundown of what I needed to do. First, confirm how deep this went. Second, lock down everything I owned. Third, make sure Lynn and David felt it. But not in rage, in silence. I started with Russell. He was younger than me by 20 years. Always polite, good with tools but not so great at lying. I caught him loading lumber near the barn and waved him over. You busy? I asked. Just cleaning up from the decking job, he said. What's up? I kept my tone friendly. You still doing side work on other properties? He hesitated, just a flicker. Now and then. Ever work out at Jackson Hill? He looked at his boots. Bingo. Yeah, he said finally. A couple weekends. Just framing and cleanup. You ever see who runs that job? He looked nervous now. I mostly dealt with the guy who drops off the plans. Tall, maybe mid-50s. Drives a black Tacoma. Name's Dave, I think. Dave. He said it casually, like he didn't know it was gasoline on a fire. I nodded. Appreciate it. He waited, maybe expecting me to yell or threaten him. I didn't. Keep this between us, I said. Nothing changes on our end. You keep working here, full pay. But if anything new gets delivered out there, I want to know about it. He nodded fast. Yes, sir. I walked away, calm on the outside. Inside, I was boiling. So it was real. David was here. Not in theory. Not in old emails. Here. On my dime. Standing on concrete I poured. Using my money. My wife's smile. My land. Next I drove into town. Pulled into the credit union where we had our joint accounts, and asked for an appointment with Amanda, the manager who knew me by name. In the office, door closed, I spoke low and steady. I need to split our funds. Freeze anything joint. Transfer my half into a separate account. Quietly. Amanda leaned back in her chair. Frank, everything okay? No, I said, but it will be. She didn't push. Just nodded and got to work. By the time I left, Lynn no longer had free access to our accounts. Next stop, the courthouse. Property records. I checked the deed. My name was still the only one listed on the ranch. I had a lawyer friend, Dan, retired but still sharp. I called him from the truck. I need to protect my land, I said, without making noise. You want to transfer it? He asked. Or lock it up in a trust? Both, if possible. He told me how. Gave me names. Told me who to call first thing Monday morning. It felt strange. Like I was hiding from someone I shared a bed with. But I wasn't hiding, I was preparing. Because the moment she knew I knew, the game would change. And I needed to be 10 steps ahead when it did. I drove home slow. Let the wind roll in through the open window. My hands felt steady on the wheel for the first time in days. Lynn was on the porch when I pulled in, phone in one hand, glass of wine in the other. She smiled like nothing had changed. You were gone a while. Had errands, I said. Bank, post office, courthouse. That got her attention. Courthouse? Needed to check on some documents. I replied. No big deal. Her smile held, but I saw it, the flicker of doubt in her eyes. Just for a second, I walked past her and into the house, and for the first time since this nightmare started, I felt like I was winning. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. Lynn stopped asking questions after the courthouse comment, but I could feel her watching me closer, like a dog sensing a storm it can't quite see. She didn't press, not yet, but her tone softened, her touches came back. She even made my favorite stew, but it was all theater. She thought maybe she'd pushed too fast, gotten too bold. Now she was trying to reel me back in, keep me steady just long enough to finish building their future. But I wasn't the same man anymore. I was done being the mule, the one who carried the weight while they drew maps behind my back. So I started building something of my own. It began with a calendar invite. Lynn had been talking for weeks about throwing a little launch party. Once the main part of the house was finished, invite the neighbors, show off the kitchen, maybe bring in a few people from town to see what we'd built. I told her it was a good idea. More than good, I said. It might be just what we need. Her eyes lit up. thinking I'd come around. You mean that? Sure, I said, sipping my coffee. We put a lot into this. We deserve a little celebration. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I let her. We set the date for 3 Saturdays from now. I offered to take care of the guest list, the food, the setup. You've done so much already, I told her. Let me handle this part. She agreed, smiling. And that was her first mistake. I started with Earl Jenkins, our neighbor 2 lots down. Retired mechanic, knows everyone in the county, and has a memory like a tape recorder. Earl, I said, walking up to his porch. We're having a little gathering in a few weeks. You and Nancy free? Sure, he said. You finally done building all that fancy nonsense? I smiled. Almost. Be nice to show folks what we've been working on. He nodded. I'll bring a bottle of the good stuff. Anything else you need? I leaned in a little. Just a favor. He raised an eyebrow. Ever heard of a guy named David Monroe? Earl scratched his chin. Architect? Came through town last winter. Real slick type. Ain't from around here, but he's been sniffing around some land up on Jackson Hill. That confirmed it. Anyone know he's connected to Lynn? Earl frowned. Not yet. Should we? Not yet, I said. And just like that, Earl was on my side. Next, I printed out copies of the emails. Not all of them. Just the ones that proved the timeline, the payments, the planning. I put them in an envelope, unmarked, and dropped it off with my lawyer friend Dan. Hold this for me, I said. If I don't call you by a certain time on the party night, open it, and do exactly what the cover page says. Dan read the top sheet and let out a low whistle. Damn, Frank, you sure? I nodded. She played me. Now I'm just returning the favor. All right, he said. I'll hold it. Let me know if you change your mind. I wouldn't. Back home, Lynn was in the kitchen, humming again. That same old song. She told me she'd picked out a dress for the party. Something special. I pretended to be excited. She leaned in. I'm glad we're doing this together, Frank. So was I. Just not the way she thought. I spent the next week calling everyone in town I could think of. Folks we knew. Folks she wanted to impress. The mayor's wife. 2 realtors. The couple from church she always bragged about knowing. Even Russell and a few of the crew. Told them it was a surprise Lynn had planned for me, that she wanted to show off what I'd built for her. The wording mattered. I made sure every person I invited thought this house was my gift to her, because the more people believed that, the bigger the impact when the truth came out. I even printed a little welcome banner and hung it in the barn, celebrating the Wallace dream, built with love. Lynn beamed when she saw it. She had no idea it would be hanging over her undoing. The morning of the party, Lynn was glowing. She floated around the kitchen like a bride getting ready for her second wedding, humming, directing last-minute details, fixing pillows like they were being judged by a magazine editor. She'd had her hair done the day before in town, got a manicure too, even bought a new white dress, casual, but expensive looking. She wanted this day to feel effortless. It wasn't. She had no idea how carefully I'd been arranging the dominoes. I'd woken up early, earlier than her, took a drive to the build site on Jackson Hill, and left something special taped to the front post. Then I came back, took a shower, made breakfast, kept everything normal. We greeted guests together at noon. Neighbors arrived with dishes and dusty boots. Folks from town pulled up in SUVs and slacks. Earl showed up with a bottle of whiskey and a grin like he already knew the ending. By 12:30, the place was full. We had music playing through a speaker on the porch, fold-out tables with barbecue. Lynn worked the crowd like a politician, smiling wide, telling stories, showing off the house like it was a trophy she'd earned. She pointed out the custom fireplace, the one David designed. She guided people through the sunroom, the one I paid for. She spoke like it was all hers, like I was the lucky man who just happened to marry into this miracle. I didn't interrupt. I didn't correct her, because the truth was waiting for its moment. At one point I saw her talking to a tall man near the garden fence. I didn't recognize him at first, until he turned his head. David Monroe, the famous ghost, the dreamer, the liar. He was in khakis and a button-down, hair just messy enough to look effortless. Clean shave, confident stance. He looked right at home. Lynn touched his arm like it meant nothing, like they hadn't been emailing love notes behind my back. She glanced at me a moment later. I waved. She waved back, a little too quickly. She was nervous. She didn't know why yet, but she could feel something in the air, something shifting. Good. At 1 o'clock, I tapped the microphone we'd set up for toasts. The crowd turned. Lynn looked surprised. I didn't know we were doing speeches, she said, laughing softly. I smiled. Figured I'd say a few words. She stepped back beside me, smiling at the crowd. I kept my voice steady. Thanks for coming, everyone. It means a lot to see so many familiar faces here. Some of you have known Lynn and me a long time. Some of you are new friends. Either way, welcome. I let that sit a second. When we moved out here, it was about starting fresh, clean air, hard work, and building something that felt real. A few nods, some polite smiles. I turned slightly toward Lynn, who stood still beside me. I thought we were building something together. She smiled at that, nodded, reached for my hand. I didn't give it. Instead, I stepped forward and held up a clipboard. This, I said, is a list of every invoice, blueprint, and bank withdrawal tied to this house. The crowd shifted. And this, I clicked a remote in my other hand, activating the projector screen I'd set up earlier behind the barn doors, is who actually designed it. David's name flashed on screen, his full signature, his company logo. The second slide showed the build site on Jackson Hill, in progress. Same design, same shape, dated. Gasps, whispers. I turned toward Lynn. Her smile had vanished. She looked frozen. Lynn, I said, maybe you'd like to explain how long you've been planning to leave this house behind. Silence. Her mouth opened, then closed. David had disappeared into the crowd. I let it hang there, a perfect bitter stillness. And then Earl, bless him, broke it with a slow whistle. Well damn, he muttered. Guess this party was a surprise. Laughter, confused, awkward, rippled through the crowd. I stepped down from the porch. Lynn didn't move. Her eyes were glassy. I didn't look back. I walked inside, shut the door, and let them all watch her squirm. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was quiet justice, delivered exactly how I wanted it. I stayed inside while the party died outside. Through the kitchen window, I saw people murmuring, gathering near their cars, casting those long sideways glances we all know too well, the kind people give when they realize they've been part of someone else's lie. Some guests tried to be polite. A few patted Lynn on the arm, said something soft and meaningless, like, "Take care," or, "Hope you two work things out," but most didn't say a word. They just walked away. David? He was gone before the projector even hit the second slide. I doubt he said goodbye. Lynn came inside around 1:40. She didn't slam the door. She didn't yell. She just walked into the kitchen like she didn't recognize the place, like the walls had changed shape. I sat at the table, quiet, sipping the same coffee I'd made that morning. It had gone cold. She stood by the fridge, staring at nothing. "You planned this," she finally said. Her voice was low, shaky. "You humiliated me." I looked up. "No. You did that all by yourself." She swallowed hard. Her arms were folded across her chest now, that same defensive posture she used when cornered. "You blindsided me. At a party. With our friends. With strangers." "Our friends?" I repeated. "The ones you paraded through a house built on lies?" She didn't answer. I set the mug down. "You could have told me. About David. About the second property. About the money. But you didn't. You planned to take everything. Smile through it. Let me pay the bill. And vanish when the keys changed hands." "It wasn't like that," she whispered. I leaned back in the chair. "Then tell me what it was like." She shook her head. "I don't know. I got scared." "Of what? Being honest?" Her lip trembled. "Of giving up the dream." "Whose dream?" I asked. That shut her up. She tried sitting down, but didn't. Just stood there shifting her weight like a kid caught cheating on a test. "You really had Earl in on it?" she asked finally. "I didn't have to ask twice," I said. She exhaled, hands on her hips now. "You're going to make me the villain." I stared at her. "You think I made you anything?" I asked, calm as ever. "You spent months building another life behind my back, Lynn, with a man you said was long gone. You lied. You schemed. You took my trust and burned it to the ground. All I did was show people the ashes." She turned away then, biting her lip, blinking fast. I didn't feel sorry for her. Not even a little. Because the woman in front of me wasn't my wife anymore. She was a stranger wearing my last name. "You told him I'd be too slow to notice," I said. "That I'd stay steady while you made your exit. You were almost right." She turned back around, eyes sharp now. "So what happens next? You divorce me? Kick me out?" I stood up. Not rushed, just steady. I walked to the drawer, pulled out a thick envelope, and dropped it on the table. She didn't touch it. "What's that?" she asked. "Everything you tried to hide," I said. "Emails, blueprints, account records, and a property transfer you didn't know I filed." Her mouth parted. "I locked everything down, Lynn. The land, the house, the accounts. You can't touch a dime that isn't already in your name. She stepped closer, voice rising. You're cutting me out? No, I said. You did that. I'm just finishing the paperwork. She looked down at the envelope, then back up at me. So that's it? I nodded. That's it. She started crying. Not loud, not dramatic, just those quiet, bitter tears you cry when you realize the bluff's been called. She reached for my arm. I stepped back. No more pretending, I said. She wiped her eyes, sniffed, and whispered, I never meant for it to get this far. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in months, I felt clear. It always gets this far, I said. You just didn't think I'd be the one to end it. She sat down then, hard, like her legs finally gave out. I left her there, in the house she thought she'd stolen, and I walked out onto the porch, into the cleanest air I'd breathed in years. Monday morning came fast. Lynn didn't sleep that night. I know because I didn't either, but unlike her, I wasn't tossing and turning. I just laid there, eyes open, waiting for the sun to rise and reality to settle in. By breakfast, the house was quiet. She barely looked at me. No humming, no coffee made, no fake smiles, just silence. She knew what was coming. By noon, the fallout had already started. The first call came from the local hardware store, the one she'd been running credit through using our shared account. Mr. Wallace, the owner said, voice low and respectful. I heard about the party. Just wanted to let you know your wife tried to pick up an order this morning, but the account's been flagged. Good, I said. Keep it that way. He didn't ask questions. The second call was from our realtor, Sandra, Lynn's old friend, or so she'd claimed. Frank, she said, a little awkward. I had an inquiry last week about a second property on Jackson Hill, supposedly linked to you and Lynn. Someone asked if we'd be listing it together next quarter. Should I assume that's not happening? Safe to assume, I said. She hesitated. You okay? I will be, I told her, and that was the truth. Lynn stayed curled up on the couch most of the day, wrapped in a throw blanket like she was cold, even though it was nearly 80 outside. She didn't say much, didn't ask questions, just stared at the floor like the answer was buried under the wood. But I wasn't finished. At 3 o'clock I took a drive, back up to the build site on Jackson Hill. This time, I didn't just stop at the edge. I drove all the way in, parked on the gravel, stepped out and walked straight up to the half-framed structure. A younger guy was hammering nails on the back deck. He looked up. Can I help you? I handed him an envelope. These are the cease and desist papers. You're trespassing. This land isn't legally permitted for residential development under the name Monroe Architecture or Lynn Wallace. It's frozen until a court reviews the build. He blinked. I'm just a subcontractor, man. I nodded. Then you might want to pack up. He didn't argue. Before I left, I pulled the sign off the post, the one that said, Site supervised by D. Monroe, and tossed it in the bed of my truck. Then I took a photo of the place from the edge of the hill. Wide, clear, perfect. And I emailed it to every guest who had been at the party. Subject line, the other house. Attachment, that photo, along with the same blueprints I'd shown at the party. A few screenshots from Lynn's emails. One line in the message. For those who asked what happened, this is what she was building while I built our life. That was it. No anger. No threats, just facts. I knew word would spread fast in a small town like ours. You don't need to scream when the truth speaks louder. By dinner, the phone was blowing up. Lynn didn't answer any of the calls, just stared at the screen, tears in her eyes, breathing shallow. I stayed in the doorway. I froze the Jackson Hill land too, I said. Court will sort it out, but she can't sell it. Not now, not ever without disclosure. She finally spoke. He left. David? She nodded, voice cracking. As soon as the party ended, he said I dragged him into something toxic. I didn't respond. Just let that sit in the air. You don't have to destroy me, she said softly. Please. I stepped closer. Not angry, not cruel, just calm. You had a choice, I said. You could have built a life with me. You had loyalty, security, respect. But that wasn't enough. You wanted fantasy, applause, a man who never had to carry your weight. She opened her mouth, but I stopped her. You didn't just cheat, Lynn. You conspired. You plotted behind my back. You used my hands to build someone else's dream. Tears ran down her face. I kept my voice level. Now you get to live in the mess you made, and this time, I'm not cleaning it up. I walked away, slow and final, and left her sitting in the silence she created. The calls stopped after 3 days. At first, her phone lit up constantly. Unknown numbers, old friends, local contacts, all trying to get a piece of the story or distance themselves from it. I'd hear her whispering in the guest room, her voice brittle and rushed, trying to explain something that couldn't be explained. Then, nothing. Silence. She stopped charging the phone altogether. When I passed her in the hallway, she didn't look at me. She looked past me, like maybe if she stayed quiet enough, still enough, she could disappear. But she couldn't. By the end of the week, her face showed up in a local news column, one of those small-town property scandal write-ups that usually sit between the classifieds and the crossword. They used her maiden name, but everyone knew who it was. The story didn't need drama. The facts were enough. 2 active building sites, misuse of funds, potential fraud. I hadn't even contacted the paper. Someone else did that for me. The community had its own sense of justice, and justice was moving fast. Her name was pulled from a volunteer board she served on in town. A realtor friend who once invited her to ladies' brunches stopped returning texts. The yoga class she loved on Thursdays quietly restructured. Her trainer took a break. Even her hairdresser canceled an appointment. I didn't gloat. I just noticed, and I kept moving forward. The paperwork for the divorce was already in motion. Dan handled everything. Quick, clean, uncontested, because there wasn't much left for Lynn to contest. The bank accounts were split. The land title was secured. The house? I kept it. Not because I wanted the memories, but because I earned it. Every board, every nail, every dollar. She didn't fight me on it. She didn't have the leverage anymore. The Jackson Hill property had been frozen pending investigation into her undeclared financial arrangements. Turns out when you funnel money through a marital account into a private build and list someone else as the architect without permits, people start paying attention. David Monroe never came back. Not to town. Not to her. From what I heard, he cut contact completely, left her on read. The man she thought would catch her after the fall didn't even bother to look down. The most she ever said about it was one night, standing on the porch in the dark, arms folded tight across her chest. I thought he was different. I stood behind her, arms crossed. He was, I said, just not in the way you hoped. She wiped her eyes and went back inside. I didn't follow. She stayed in the guest room for another week. Then, one quiet Saturday morning, I came downstairs and found a suitcase by the front door. Her keys were on the counter. Her wedding ring was beside them. She didn't say goodbye. No final speech. No apology. She just left. I watched her drive away from the front porch. That same white SUV she used to pick tile and wallpaper for someone else's dream now carried her away from the wreckage of it. The dust hung in the air for a long time after she was gone. Inside, the silence was real now. Not the tense kind. Not the waiting for the other shoe kind. Just quiet. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, looked around the house. It wasn't poisoned anymore. It was mine. A few days later, I walked into town. People greeted me with nods. Some offered pats on the back, or quiet phrases like, "Heard what happened," or "You handled it right." I didn't need more than that. Dignity doesn't come from what you say. It comes from what you don't. I passed the hardware store, the diner, the corner where Lynn used to wave at everyone like she owned the place. Now, no one waved back. That was the cost of her choices. No more spotlight. No more applause. Just echoes of a story that everybody now knew. Not the one she told, the one I showed.